Welcome to Big Blend Radio, where we celebrate variety and how it adds spice to quality of life. Welcome, everyone. It is Earth Day, right? So we have got one of the best guests on the show to talk about how to green up your community and your city. It's really important. As many of you know, Nancy and I travel the country documenting parks and public lands. What started off as a National Park Service effort to document all those parks turned to state parks, forest, Bureau of Land Management land. And then it really became apparent that all parks matter. And we also have watched parks be put in place. We've seen landfills be turned into green spaces and hummingbird gardens and places for the public, rivers being cleaned. And it is an exciting thing. And I think that's what Earth Day really is about, to remind us of what we can do, what are the possibilities. And we have Kris Kiser back on the show. It's been a couple years. So this is, we should have had him on earlier, but Earth Day is perfect. He is the president and CEO of the TurfMutt Foundation, and you can go to turfmutt.com to learn more. But welcome back, Kris. How are you?
So good to be with you again. Thank you for having me on Earth Day. Good to be there.
We're going to talk backyarding, right? And this is so cool. The last time you were on the show, we were talking about, especially after COVID, it was like, how do we get our backyard spaces into living spaces, as you say, backyarding.
Sure. Yeah.
And we've done so many shows on that kind of theme as well. And especially, listen, you got to have the right plants in your garden if you have dogs, right? That's a huge part of it. So I think that's important in parks too. That's something we see is what's going on with the landscaping in communities. What is happening? Are we putting the right plants in that are good for people and pets, because pets are part of the world? But talking about green spaces, especially for cities, is something our audience has told us in so many ways, and us going across the country and seeing the difference. You can literally feel the difference in the air quality. You feel calmer. Wildlife comes back. So it's economically huge. I know you've got 5 main points and I'm probably stealing them all, but this is really like a passion thing for us about greening up urban areas.
Absolutely. It's a passion for us as well. And so the TurfMutt Foundation, principally, our education curriculum is focused on kids to help them with what we call backpack programming, get those messages home to their parents. And so, yes, in COVID, we had a really, really big year. We've reached 70 million kids, but we call it backyarding, as you described, is find your backyarding, find your personality type, whether you're entertaining outside, exercising outside, you want to be a landscaper, nature lover, pet lover, etc. All these different things. You can tailor that landscape for your individual needs. We don't want the nature, your yard, your landscape just to be aesthetic, to be, pretty. It's purposeful. You described a pollinator garden, for example. That's all about knowing your zone, right? Right plant, right place. And in particular, do you have kids? Do you have dogs? But today, our focus, we've really begun to focus on community green space, parks, expansion of parks. So the TurfMutt Foundation is the education arm of the Outdoor Power Equipment Institute and Equip Exposition, one of the largest trade shows in the country, which is in Louisville, Kentucky every year. And so we have a office here as well. I've moved to Louisville 2.5 years ago, and Louisville has invested significantly in a park system. And I'm involved very closely with the Waterfront Park Development Corporation as they redevelop their riverfront. You talked at length about changing industrial areas into green spaces, and Louisville has been masterfully successful with that, reconnecting community to that riverfront.
Well, to me, that's something really big that we watched Yuma, Arizona do. So Yuma, Arizona is in the southwest corner of Arizona, and it is the last area that you're going to see the Colorado River before it goes into Mexico. And so this city, it was incredible. I get teary about it. So the lower part of the Colorado River had pollutants in it. We're in a massive agricultural zone, and it had a lot of invasive species. And right from this very historic downtown, and this is the sunniest place on earth by the Guinness World Book of Records. And trust me, I've been there, man. I tell you, you never need a hair dryer. You just walk outside, you're crispy. But this area, so the water wasn't doing well. and it was a dead space. In fact, they called it hobo camp, and no, that's not politically correct, but that historically is what it was called. And 49 agencies, and I apologize to audiences who've heard this story, but it's just so well worth, talking about. 49 agencies, including different Native American tribes of the area, got together and said, we're going to fix this. They got an environmental engineer, like he really knew what to do, get the invasive species back. They planted cottonwood trees along the riverfront. They started to clean up the water. And this became, suddenly families came out. The economics that come with this is massive. Now it is part of the Yuma Crossing National Heritage Area, which is connected with national parks and communities. It's a wonderful, and business, right? So this area went from being contaminated, having a landfill. Where the landfill was, they put in a solar plant. So you could see a solar farm, very small. They put in, the water's clean. So people are now kayaking. There's now businesses that take people down the river.
Right.
So there's shade trees for families, ramadas. There's a pond where people can fish. It's two parts. One is a whole wetlands preserve. Beaver came back. Special birds that weren't there came back. Bobcat came back. All of, so there's areas where people can cycle from the east to the west wetlands. So they're connecting parks like what you're saying in Louisville. They put in hummingbird gardens so you can see native plant species. Anyway, so this, they make money. The city makes money from renting out the ramadas or the little, gazebo things. So, by the way, Louisville has some great park areas we have been to with good gazebos. Kentucky does well on that. But we see tourism start to come back.
Right, right.
Sense of community come back. Families being together. It just, and it was cleaner, and it's also right next to a river, a railroad. So it needed that cleaning up. And we went kayaking with two kayak guides from the city, and we went from where the Gila River crosses the Colorado River. And the Gila River, it's not really much there left at that point, which is sad, but we went through kind of the contaminated area, right? And there were some birds and some things. But as soon as you hit where they replanted the indigenous plants and the native plants, it was like an invisible curtain where all suddenly birds were flying, like everybody was there. They're like, y'all, the party's over here. That part sucks. We can eat, we can, swim, we can do whatever. I've never seen that kind of, like, it was that eye-opening to me, that you could just go from one paddle stroke and it was a huge difference. Amazing.
Exactly. I think Louisville here, again, it's the closest I am. I'm part of their organization. But it was an industrial wasteland, a lot of heavy industry, metals, recycling, gravel, cement, power production, et cetera. And the interstate had been designed to run along the riverfront. So it really did separate the city from the river and the businesses of the river, right? It's a big thoroughfare. But they've done it now for 30 years. It was someone's grand vision. But you mentioned railroad trestle. They literally took a railroad bridge and made it a pedestrian bridge. You can walk across the Ohio River. There's a great lawn there. There's an amphitheater.
Was that Rails to Trails? Was that part of a Rails to Trails program?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
But that's now Rails to Trails has come here wanting to do a second project downriver. This connects Louisville to what's Jeffersonville, Indiana. There's another one on the other end to New Albany, Indiana. But there is and it's you don't share the bridge, right? It's not shared with traffic or railroads or vehicular traffic. But you can walk across and it's a mile, right? But the outdoor amphitheater, hiking trails, wildlife areas, and there's a 5+ acre just lawn. That's a community lawn space, huge events, Thunder Over Louisville, balloon race, concerts. We're actually going to try to break a Guinness Book of World Record on that lawn, September the 6th, of dogs watching a movie. TurfMutt's told from a dog's point of view. We are a partner with the Kentucky Humane Society. We have a national dog adoption event. My dog is the spokes dog of the foundation. Remember, all our curriculum is told from a dog's point of view. So we're going to try to break a Guinness Book of World Record on the Great Lawn, September the 6th, in partnership with the park, the Louisville Downtown Partnership, the Kentucky Humane Society. Los Angeles has that record, but we intend to beat it in September. But it's community. It's bringing people together and allowing folks to, and you described it, stress relief, anxiety relief. It's called all kinds of things: grounding, earthing, force washing. But there really is a body of evidence now about the health benefits of being exposed to green space. And importantly, it helps get our kids off their devices, get them outdoors. We talk about getting a dog to help them do that. But connecting to the outdoors, being around green spaces, it's economically helpful for the city, as you described.
Yeah, it really is. And when you go in as a visitor, it feels welcoming. It's so funny because of a lot of the work we do in tourism. We talk about, we will, go on a media trip and do what's called a fam tour, run around, see what should be covered. It's very, very fast moving. And I always say, well, what about your city parks? And they look at me like, what? Who cares? National parks, state parks, we have this. I'm like, no, the city park. And they're like, well, that's not really tourism. I said, of course it is. You want to, if you have kids and a pet and you're traveling with a pet, those, kids, all of them need to go run somewhere and get it out of their system, especially if they've been in the car for how long. And I know like this year is going to, road tripping is going to be a big deal, and they need those spaces to have a picnic, that kind of thing. So I think it is absolutely part of tourism, and getting people, and like Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas, the waterfront, like what you're talking about, Louisville, they did the same thing. They have a walkway that is over a mile, right, where it's a health mile, they call it, and it's to walk, and they have all these signs telling you, what you're doing for your body by taking a walk a day, kind of thing. It's sponsored by I think from the hospital or something like that. But they put sculpture and art, so it's also a way of bringing art into an area and slowing people down who may just walk into the city and buy something. So
exactly. And again, the growing body of evidence, we now know, the studies have shown that if you're walking a tree-lined street, you're more inclined to go into shops, you're more inclined to buy, you're more inclined to spend some time, sit down in the shade. Just literally the comfort, you're less likely to be, crime is reduced in greener spaces. Lots, if abandoned lots are greened over, there's a direct correlation to safety. But importantly, and key to TurfMutt programming is connecting to nature. You just described, look, we coexist together, right? So all these man-made environments. It doesn't take much green space to get migrating birds and insects to stop by. We all know we coexist with foxes and coyotes and deer in our urban environments. And it doesn't take much to connect to nature, as you described. And again, I'm so proud to be part of it here in Louisville, because the park system, they've really done an extraordinary job, and they're spread throughout the city. And in particular, the westward expansion, we've cut the ribbon last week on what's called Playport, a big area for kids to learn about STEM education and the jobs of the river. But it's out west. It's, this is miles and miles and miles of park. And so it's the traditionally underserved community, a more urban area, industrialized area on the west side of town. And so they're pushing the green spaces along the western expansion, which is badly, badly needed. So Louisville's working hard to connect an underserved community to green spaces.
Oh, and that's the other thing. What we've found in all the interviews we've done with all the studies, like we're saying, that this is all backed by studies, what we're talking about. What we learned from American Forests with their tree equity program is, you can go on a map on their site. I think it's treeequity.org, and you put in your zip code and you'll find out what your tree equity is. Right. Which is huge. And what the findings are is that most of the time, if it's a minority neighborhood, they are underserved in actual green space and underserved in trees. And then people are wondering, well, why do they have to have more healthcare? Well, there you go. So putting in green spaces in underserved areas, to me, is crucial for just, like you're saying, I don't know, to me, it's a stress reliever, and we all need to calm the heck down.
Well, and in particular in urban environment, they're very, very specific. They dissipate heat, the heat island effect. They captured slow runoff, et cetera. Dust and particulate matter. There are known species of trees that are better at cleaning up pollution, right? Cleaning up the air, as you described. listen, our green spaces, our lawns are the largest carbon sink in the country, right? So if you're interested in climate change, well, that produces oxygen. That's just photosynthesis. So all these green spaces, and in particular in urban environments, they clean the air, they filter pollution, they filter runoff, they sequester carbon, all of these benefits while at the same time providing habitat for insects and animals, et cetera, so the ecosystem can reestablish. And it doesn't take long. We tell people in urban environment, well, I don't have a yard, I can't do anything. If you've got a windowsill, you could put a butterfly bush in a pot, right? You could do it with a patio, you can do it in a rooftop garden or your community garden. Plant a butterfly bush. You're going to get pollinators, you're going to get butterflies, you're going to get hummingbirds, and you can do your part. It doesn't take much green space to do your part.
Yeah, and I think that's the other key thing is a lot of people have downsized over the years just with economics and moved into apartments, and townhouses and condos, and everyone's got a different situation, right? That means more green space is needed. And I've seen, I had a friend, and he's passed away. He ran Bethesda Green in Maryland. And what they did is they would go into different neighborhoods in like apartment complexes, look at the land and reforest, put green space in, composting programs, all of this so that, apartments, townhomes, I believe those developments I know Green Earth USA, I'm going to get it wrong. Anyway, there is a movement that those areas need to put more green space in for,
Right.
And then also, hey, the city needs to have these green spaces for those who do not have a backyard.
That's critically important. If lots of, whether apartments, condos, or just an urban environment. And again, the cities you've described, the ones I'm familiar with, those that have invested in green spaces, in parks, et cetera, their citizens truly derive a benefit. They become more attractive. They'll draw growth, they'll draw populace, they'll draw people. People are now connecting to this green space. It really took off in COVID. So for a city, that's terrific economic development. Those investments pay off time after time.
I just got off an interview with Ben Berthelot from Travel Lafayette, Louisiana. And first thing he said to me, I almost fell off my chair, and he had just come back from Louisville. I was like, did you go to the park? And then the first thing he said on the podcast was talking about their park, Munson Park. And it was put in through the university many, many years ago. It's a historic park. And he goes, this is a park that everyone comes to. Lafayette, Louisiana is known as the happiest city in America. And he goes, that's the start of it, is this park. Yeah. And then he said, then it's, university, and they got, they're in the heart of Cajun and Creole country. So like, it's fun, right? A lot of fun and a lot of nature. And he said, you got nature, music, food. And he goes, these green spaces for a city are crucial. And he said, somebody taught him a long time ago that a city either grows or it dies, period. And so I think that's really goes hand in hand. What you're talking about is if your city inhabitants are not happy, or your community inhabitants do not have things that make them come together as a community, you're going to lose them. And as we all know in business, it takes a lot to get your first customer in the door, right? Oh. That's expensive. So it's better to keep them happy. I mean, you always have to get new people, but you know what I mean?
You bet. I'm looking at the background on our interview
there
here.
You go, Chicago.
What an extraordinary park system. Again, those cities that have invested, look, cities are learning, right? Because they are losing citizens to other communities where they have access to green space, whether it's, as you just described, just sitting, there's so many scientific studies now, just sitting in a park, the reduction in cortisol, right? The stress hormone, stress, anxiety relief. We all need more exercise. Hike the parks, walk your dog. Again, we do so much from a dog's point of view because it makes it sticky for kids. TurfMutt is a superhero dog character. There's a real dog behind the character.
You're going to have to come on our Pet Connection podcast that we have now.
Oh, gosh. I have a thing. She's on television. We're going to be the title sponsor of Lucky Dog this year. It's on CBS on Saturday mornings. It's in the education information space. We just did 3 Mission Unstoppables, also Saturday morning TV shows. Just shot them in the park on the Great Lawn in Riverport. showcasing these things, because there are a lot of careers, jobs associated with the outdoors, whether landscape, hardscape, irrigation, tree care, you name it. But in Louisville here, it's the river, connecting community to its history. Louisville got started because of the river, the Falls of the Ohio,
Right.
and the amount of traffic and just the jobs because of the river, and it's connecting the city. That's just a learning environment, not just STEM education, not just environmental education, but understanding the connection, their historic connection to the city. And that's done through the park system. Again, it's unbelievable effort here. Again, we're so happy to be a part of it. But again, it was a vision 30 years ago that's just coming in. And it does take a significant amount of time, energy, and money to transition heavy industry spaces into green spaces. So it's vision, time, money. And those cities that make that commitment, make that investment, it pays off.
Yeah, it I think it comes from the community themselves too, communicating with your city. I think,
You bet.
we're looking at things federally, obviously, but um, it all starts in your backyard. I always believe that. If you're, angry at what's going on in Washington, D.C., start, with your backyard people and say, hey, I'm your neighbor. Let's get something done, whatever
You
it
bet.
is. And I think city parks, the Parks and Rec department, I've watched what has happened over the years with Parks and Rec, and it really is important that families communicate with the city and talk about how important it is for them. Because the minute you don't, the minute it gets contracted out and then they're not hiring in the city anymore, and then the minute you don't, one day you wake up and you don't have a park, or it gets inhabited in ways like I started off in talking about in Yuma. So it's important for people to get on the bandwagon with it. One of the better areas I've seen that really did an amazing job is Madison, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
It's a capital city. Just
Yep.
even the Capitol building is gorgeous, especially in spring. So we've been there in the snow and blizzards and everything, and we're like, no. But then no, and then we did it again, even though we said no. But dogs were involved, so it's all about the dogs. A great walking city for dogs with amazing trail systems. So even in the dead of winter, there's areas for you to take your dog and walk, and there's playgrounds. I mean, every neighborhood seems to have one. And from what our park ranger friends say, every human needs a park within 8 to 10 minutes from their home, nothing longer than that, because they will not go. So for the health of the people, that needs to
Yep.
happen. And Madison, I can't even believe, like, you could go to their botanical garden and you can go to their arboretum 100% free. They have all of these parks that just with water and birds, and you want lawns. You all need to get busy in Madison. You probably are, but I'm just saying, it's, you understand why they have snow and why it's important when you go in the spring and summer and the fall. It's gorgeous. But to be able to access parks in all seasons easily, I mean, you just
Oh,
walk out your
absolutely.
door. It's
Absolutely.
awesome.
And the folks in Minnesota and Wisconsin understand that, right? They tailor their outdoors folks. I mean, I have family we're from Nina Menasha.
Okay.
Whether
I'm
it's,
glad you could say that.
I know, right? Whether it's hiking or snowmobiling or what have you, it's an outdoor culture, and they dress for it. They're prepared for it. I mean, go to a Green Bay game. It's
Yeah.
not tough for them. They love it. But connecting to the outdoors there, they understand it. They're outdoors folks. And remember, again, TurfMutt, the seasonality of it, we embrace it. There are things that flower throughout the year. There are things that flower in the wintertime. There are things that you can help nature. And those are oftentimes challenging periods for animals, insects, etc.
Mhm.
You can help them out very much so. Early spring flowers. Set your mower up, let the little clover flower. Helps the bees early on in the spring are desperate for food.
Mm.
So there's all kinds of things we can do. Again, it's all knowing your zone, right? Yuma, Arizona is very different than Madison, Wisconsin.
Oh,
Um,
big time.
so planting the right plants, the right grasses, that's
Oh, the
key.
right
Again, that's what
grasses.
TurfMutt's
Oh,
about, teaching those
oh,
lessons.
I want to ask you about that because, as you know, we travel and we also pet sit as we travel, right? Through trusted house sitters. And it's
Yeah.
not a money making thing, but it certainly is fun. We get to see how people live across the country and
Yeah.
live within these communities, which is, I mean, amazing. um, what we have seen is there's a lot of developments, right? Like if you go to Florida, there's all these different housing developments. What we have started to see is that these developments are actually putting in community garden areas. Even if people have backyards or whatever,
Yeah.
they're actually putting in areas where there's raised beds. We're seeing, of course, pickleball is everywhere now in the world. We're seeing, grassy areas, pathways for animals. Are you seeing that change in your industry? Just in regards to landscaping, that it's not just like when we talk about community and urban parks, it's also these massive housing developments
You
that
bet.
need to have these green spaces.
Well, and folks are reconnecting again. For us as an industry, we really saw it take root during the time of COVID, when that outdoor space became an extension of home, and it was the safe space. Remember, you could cook outside, entertain
Mhm.
outdoors, exercise outdoors, have friends over outdoors, and people reconnected to it. And particularly younger people, that became purposeful. So they're very supportive of green spaces that are purposeful, that they serve a purpose. And there's now a much better understanding in schools and curriculum, which is what we do, is helping people understand the direct benefit correlation analysis. And so kids today, again, they don't want a yard that's just pretty. They want a yard that's purposeful, and it's so easy to do. Nature starts at your back door. So
Yeah.
whether you have a yard or access to a park, is we all have a part to play, and if we simply pull together, that happens. Again, there is a recognition of the value, and it used to be there became an understanding, like you have a golf course, like you said, in a Florida community. Well, and that's where the nature was. That's where the birds were, or the beaver, or the
Audubon courses,
alligator.
yeah.
That's where
Yeah.
everything was. And again, it's just a green zone. So something migrating birds, for example, they just look down and see green. Now, if you have a place for them to rest, to recharge and eat, they might hang out through the season. But that's what they're looking for, those green spaces. And so we're now seeing, the evolution and expansion of golf courses into green spaces that serving other purposes in a community. Community gardens, part of that's also social. You can have your own garden in your yard, but a lot of folks now like gardening with others. Again,
Hmm.
community green spaces, assigned gardens, and people are
Wow.
learning to live with rabbits and deer. One of the things, I came 35 years in Washington D.C. 2.5 years ago, I moved to Louisville, Kentucky. I have an acre and a half, so I coexist here with everything we've described. But I've learned, what the rabbits are going to eat, what the deer are going to eat, where the coyote comes in, where the fox comes in, the raccoons come
It
in.
is cool.
It's cool. I have an office outdoors. We had a lot of rain here, so I'm not in it right as we speak. But again, if you're this call, if I put out cashews, I can tell you what birds will come, and they'll.
Yeah.
And I have a fox. If the dogs aren't out, the fox, who's very curious, he'll come up and just lay in the sun beside me. It really is a shared existence,
Wow.
and that's what we want folks to do.
Yeah, and I think the city parks and just wherever you can put a park, taking vacant land like you were talking about, that, really that does become crime. I remember we bought some property in a house up in the high desert in California many years ago, and we had vacant lots on either side, and we're like, should we buy these? And we have like a little oasis, like, a lot of desert land, but we didn't. And what was going on is, well, this community itself, and I won't name it out, but did not invest like they should. Now they have and started getting into parks. When parks happen, I want to go on the crime because it's so crucial. We see graffiti, we see things like that, and we do have a lot of those who are homeless in the country. And so there's this balance going on, and I'm not calling homeless people criminals whatsoever. I'm just saying there's this balance. But a city park brings people together, which are the watchdogs of a community. And it's like, oh, I better not, do graffiti here because someone's going to see me. And also, you know what I mean? It's like,
You
hey,
bet.
the community we lived in, the vacant lots, people do things in the desert. They dump things, they do whatever. it got to a point, and this community actually ended up losing its fire department, its police department, and we had martial law at this point because it was a
Wow.
military. Yeah. Anyway, so but they've reinvested and it's a lot better now. But at this point it wasn't, and we did actually move. People were going in the vacant lots, and we had one in front of us, one on either side of us, and they were doing drugs, they were doing all kinds. I mean, we were up all the time. And then one day we didn't have the police to call them, except for the ones that would have to drive in from another city 45 minutes to an hour away, and a lot can happen in that time frame. So we were always on edge, with what was going on in these vacant lots. And one was just like this massive track. I mean, it was massive, and then people started doing racing their cars in this desert land where we used to sit and watch, road runners and quail. And, then people started coming out and trying to steal the lizards, the native lizards, for pet stores. I mean, it got horrible. So I'm not trying to be mean, everybody. I'm just trying to tell you this can go. Everyone's probably had some kind of experience like this in their life. When you put a park in these kind of vacant areas, it shows pride in attendance and attention to detail. And I think that takes, a criminal, you've got to put up all your defenses. Let's put it that way. Crime happens where no one's watching.
Right. And last year we gave the city here in Louisville, we call it Bark Park, Mulligan. There's a big mural on it.
Oh, cool. See, that helps. Public art.
It's a fantastic Bark Park. And so it was an old concrete areas, the old trolley turnaround off of 4th Street, off of 4th and Broadway, literally fully unused, big area of concrete, fencing, et cetera. And so we greened it up, right? And created a Bark Park, dog park, which is now in constant use. It doesn't take much, and it's a small little community park. But again, we did it as an example to show Louisville and other cities, it doesn't take much to transition what you've described, problem areas, unused areas, unsightly areas, for abuse, into something productive. And again, people have taken pride in that. And you're right, they essentially police it, they eyeball it. Again, create those green spaces, and the folks and the dogs will come.
Yeah. Santa Fe, New Mexico, right? Known world round for art, right? And
Right.
it's Native American culture, Spanish culture, Mexican culture, very historic. Well, there's the plaza area that's very famous, and that's where all the travelers go. And well, there's this one area, the rail yard depot, and this was just an amazing change. So this was a brown space, because you also, like we were talking about the railroad in Louisville, right? Taking an old piece of railroad, turning it into something useful, right? And brown space can really, leach pollutants. And you take old gas stations, and I'm looking at that now with gas stations going electric and what's going on, because gas stations do create a brown, like it's a dirty space. Let's put it that way, everybody. So green is healthy and happy. They took this old railroad area that also were a lot of people that shouldn't be hanging out there, and saw, like, we have all these communities going around. They took the actual depot and they started to transform it into art space. Then they took the actual historic railroad part and they made this amazing garden, and using some of the old railroad parts as also like sculpture. Instead of going, okay, we have to toss it, let's make it into something. And it also shows the history of the railroad. They did this whole rotunda of this just gorgeous, gorgeous rose garden, massive. They had a green space area, a lawn, you'd like this, a big lawn. And that area they used for temporary art, community art that would come in. They have events, community events, everybody comes. And, it's kind of in that town where, that kind of area where it's in between, like the box stores and everything that people need versus the charming old town. It's that in between zone. So a lot of, say, the housing is all different levels of, it's just a mix match, right? So they know that a lot of people, used to live there, and they also deal with a community that is homeless, at this point, right? So what they did is there's water running through because that's part of the way the water system works. They have a waffle garden showing how the Native Americans cleaned water, how they do gardens. So there's demonstration gardens, but they grew an orchard along this waterway, a very small canal kind of thing, an orchard and things so that those who are experiencing homeless have food. They could go get food, which changes the outlook of how they treated this space. So it was,
Absolutely. Creative
isn't that
thinking.
cool?
Well, and then people, urban environments, they said there's nothing you can do when you have a certain amount of density, et cetera. New York City, the High Line, right?
Oh, yeah.
So crazy density, crazy value of property, an unused rail line, elevated rail line turned into now an unbelievable economic zone, growth zone. Everyone wants to live along the High Line. Everybody wants to shop along the High Line. Again, it's just a small area of elevated track system that they turned into a walking park. And it literally changed the entirety of the neighborhood, both commercial and living. It was a tough area of town. I'm an old New Yorker as well. But again, if the right vision, the right commitment, the right financials, then you can make it happen. An old railroad trestle now is one of the most sought after places to live in New York City.
Man, I feel like a whole feature coming on. I think I have to redo our community park feature now. Because as we're talking, I'm like, oh, and then there's this park over here that did this over there. But it is about that involvement and creating some events to get people there.
You bet.
I like that about the creative thinking, because when you're unhappy with what is going on in your community, take action. And this is one of the most positive things you can do.
Right.
You know?
And typically, like here, some of the systems, again, it was community groundswell. Voices, they banded together, they worked together, they convinced the local town council and boards, and then the board sought approval from the state, then the state worked with the feds. So the waterfront park here it's a joint state, local, the National Park Service is involved because of, it's an extraordinary, and remember, it connects Indiana. And so when you driving down Interstate 65, you leave Indiana.
I know, that's how we ended up there last time, and I got twirled around. And I went over railroad tracks. Yeah.
Big zone of green down along the riverfront, which did not exist. It used to be gravel pits and power plants.
Wow.
So you can do it. But again, we have to recognize that oftentimes it's a long-term investment. Here, 30 years. But now, they closed voting today, the USA Today Best Riverfront Park Contest. Louisville never would have been there again. So that's economic development. That's growth. That's getting people here. You described it. They're water features. It's connecting outdoors. And so that's, again, for TurfMutt, those are our key fundamental lessons.
Well, I know we're going west. Right now we're in Asheville, North Carolina, and their parks are slowly coming back. And it was actually one of the first things we covered after Hurricane Helene. But we're going west, and I know we're going through Kentucky. So now you've given me a detour.
Oh, fantastic. You've got to check out Riverport. You're going to see, we'll send you a video from the ribbon cutting just a few days ago. It's an extraordinary thing for kids. It is an extraordinary development.
I love it.
It's called Riverport. It's right downtown. It's very near the TurfMutt Great Lawn, but it's an exceptional achievement.
Oh, we'll have to do that. Well, all right, you convinced me. It didn't take much though, really, but I love this. And I also think these kind of areas are, when they start putting up educational things in these kinds of parks, it's great for those who are homeschooling too. And it's a great meeting place for homeschooling kids, because there's a lot of that happening, So yeah, I could go on and on and on. This is one of my favorite topics, but you've kind of got me. Now I'm going to have to go do my community park map, because, it is just some of the parks out there. And I encourage those traveling this year, go to your community parks that you're traveling through, go have a picnic in the park. July is National Picnic Month, just kind of getting everybody prepared. Thanks so much, Kris. It's
Oh,
great to have you back on the show. Everyone, you can go to turfmutt.com to learn more. And don't you have like an educational booklet, a
oh
backyard in?
God.
Tell
Yeah,
everyone about that.
we've had curriculum partners, Scholastic, Discovery, Weekly Reader. We're in the Global Learning Lab of the United States Green Building Council. Yeah, it's a very significant place. Like you said, homeschoolers. So during COVID, when parents found themselves educators at home with their kids, we have a lot of lesson plans and curriculum designed for parents, at home folks to work with their kids. Really, again, the classroom is at your back door. And so we have lots of that at turfmutt.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
Next time we do this, it'll be in a park.
Super. Happy to do it.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.